Right, we are recording, so let's get started. I'm going to start. That's what I want. Hold on just a minute. So last week, we got a little taste of what it was like to travel over to Sierra Leone. We shared a video that Mohammed had made on his last trip. And so here I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to show you where exactly we would be going. So here is Sierra Leone, this area right here. And if you see, it says the UMC Urban Center. That is where the CRC Mercy Hospital is located in Bow. And so if you see this area that looks a little like the outline of Australia, this is the UMC Urban Center. And down here in the front, these buildings are Mercy Hospital. So this is the main hospital building and the surgical wing. This has offices, there's the laboratory, and that's the Mercy Hospital section. Back behind Mercy Hospital, inside this walled compound here, this is the Child Reintegration Center. Here's the offices here and the Great Hall. There's a dining room. There's a small soccer pitch. This over here is the large soccer pitch where when they have big community gatherings and a lot of the children, especially from the community, come in and they have soccer matches. And then in this tiny little triangular area right here, that is the Missionary Training Center, and that's where our teams all stay. So if you imagine that you've gone on this trip, you've gotten across the ocean and you landed in Freetown and you took that drive out to Bow, and here is where you will be staying. So we are going to change the screen share. Okay. So the Missionary Training Center, we're going to give you a little tour, and I think I got the audio working.
My name is Fudia Anes. I work at the Missionary Training Center. Welcome to the Missionary Training Center. We are now inside of the MTC. Here is the car park, the small car park that you can see. The MTC was also built 2007, and this is the compound. The inside of the MTC, we have the visiting hall. So now we can go inside. We have the apartments here called Tompolini, where small families can stay. It has a small sitting room here, and we have twins bed in here, and it has its own bathroom. Another apartment for small families. There is a small sitting room where missionaries sit to do their works, prayers, and so many things. There's another apartment again my apartment, and we have big rooms here, 6 beds, with the mosquito net. It's a highway, so we're going down. We have a men's toilet here in that room. And this is the way to the dining. This is the dining. Now here's normally take breakfast, lunch, and all their meals. It's a very important place, part of this missionary training center. I have a small outside kitchen here. There I normally prepare all the meals. And this is the back of the missionary training center. We have a small house behind there. We call it the caretaker's quarter.
Okay, so that was a little tour of where our missionaries stay when they travel to Bo. Fudia is the caretaker. She has working with her an assistant, his name is Gina, and a cook whose name is Rosaline. And there's a driver who can take our teams around places they need to go. His name is Joseph. And all of our teams normally would stay in those larger rooms where it has 6 beds. It's a little bit like a dormitory room. And then there's shared bathrooms on the hallway. So right next door is the CRC. And we're going to have a little tour from the CRC director, whose name is Olivia.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Child Reintegration Center. Our professional staff here are committed to saving and transforming lives, strengthening and uniting families, unlocking potentials, and modeling global child care. You are highly welcome. The CRC compound was originally designed to have children in the orphanage. Therefore, we have 2 sections. We have the administrative building and then the residential at the back. With the global movement, CRC has learned the best practices. That is, to have children with their families. Therefore, CRC has successfully transitioned to family-based programs. This new approach has brought amazing benefits to the overall growth of the programs as children are thriving, families empowered, communities are equipped, and CRC has become more globally recognized as a leader in changing the way children are cared for. And as such, we do train, we coach, and we mentor other organizations, orphanages, on how to successfully transition from the orphanage to the family base. Let us start with the administrative building. This is the Great Hall. This is where normally we have workshops. When our children come for letter writing, this is where it is normally done. We have workshops, we have meetings. This is where they are held. It can take up to 200 and more people. On both sides of the build of this hall are offices for staff. This is the Happy Hall. The happy hall is normally where we have our board meetings, our supervisory committee meetings. This is where we normally have our morning devotion, and any training for staff is being done in here. That is all for the administrative building. Now let us go to the other facilities. We'll start with this one. This was Deborah family home. They had about 8 children. Now you will notice that all our dormitories have been named from characters in the Bible. After the transition, this home now is being used as the director's residence. Next to the Deborah family, we have the Abraham and Jeremiah family home. After the transition, these rooms now are being used as offices. We have a playroom where the early child program is using for the kids. We also have a room occupied by the teachers in the early child program. All the rest are used for offices. Next, we have the David family home. The David family home was one of the largest, having 18 children. Presently, it is under renovation. It is going to be renovated and used for the TCM, that is the training, coaching, and mentoring department. Part of this building is going to be used for offices, and also it is being renovated to host members of the community when we have overnight workshop organized by the TCM department. As an extension, we have the sewing room, the library, and the computer lab. These still being used by the children. They come to do some sewing, to visit the library, and do some computer training. Next, we have the Esther family home, and then on the other side, we have the roof. The Esther family home is now having an interim home, wherein the children that we rescue, especially those from the street, whilst we are going on with the tracing of the family, they are being kept here for not more than 2 weeks. Now that is all for the dormitories. Quickly, let me show you to the other spaces.
They create families.
This is the dining hall.
Find a woman and give her
Still in use, because whenever we have Christmas parties, we have some social gatherings,
I don't think
where the children will come to have their lunch or breakfast or whatever is being provided for them. Part of it is also occupied by the early childhood program. The dining hall is connected to the kitchen. This was where food was being prepared for the children in the residence. Even now, when we have occasions like Christmas party or social gathering, this is where food is being prepared for the children. We have a water well and pump, which is still in use. It supplies water to the whole compound. And then we have our playground. It is still in use. It's used by the children in the early child program. And also when our children come in for fun time, they still use the playground. The soccer pitch is right down there. There the children still use to play football. The generator room is right down at the extreme end. Finally, we will end our tour at the Peace Court. Here we do have some small meetings, or when the children come for extra classes, they meet here, and then it's also used to come and relax and have fun. Thank you very much, and God bless for taking the tour with me.
So that was a tour of the existing child reintegration center. And as you heard, Olivia was telling you about the different dormitories that had been used for the residents and now are being transitioned to being used for different things. So the training, coaching, and mentoring department, they're putting in some areas where people from the community can come in and stay when they have weekend workshops. And she mentioned a number of times the early childhood program. That's a preschool program that uses some of the buildings for young children during the week. They have teachers who use some of those rooms. They use the old dining room as part of the school for the very smallest children.
Linda, are there any plans right now to expand it or to build on it anymore? Is any of that in the works right now, or are they just kind of set for the moment?
There were some plans originally when we made the transition. What were we going to do with the buildings? Bishop Yambasu at the time had wanted to actually create a school and build on the large area that's outside of the wall, and actually build like a nursing school or something like that. He didn't get a lot of support for that. And as many of you may know, Bishop Yambasu died last August in a car accident. And they are just in the process of electing a new bishop. And of course, the Bishop of Sierra Leone, the Sierra Leone Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church, owns all of the property that the Child Reintegration Center is located on. And so ultimately, it is up to the bishop what the facility is used for. I have a quick question for you all. Did anyone do the homework and make jollof rice? Rebecca, you did.
I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. So I made two substitutions. One is and so I have 4 boys in my house. So there's 6 of us around here. 4 very fair-skinned Polish German boys in our house. And so I swapped out the Spam, because we don't eat Spam in this house, for canned chicken instead. And I cut the spice down by 2/3, and I have been informed they would appreciate it if I did not make that again. So my very fair-skinned children were not fans of the rice. I am enjoying it every day for lunch and probably next week as well. So it made a ton. It made a ton. It's a great, anybody who's ever been on mission trips, one of the big things is cooking as a team. That's one of the reasons we can't travel as mission trips right now. But it's always trying to find recipes that are big enough to be able to feed the entire team. And you could feed the entire team with what was on my stove. So it was, wow. I enjoyed it, but it makes a lot when you make that recipe.
Yes, it does.
Marianne,
go ahead.
This is Marianne and Paul. We made it also. And again, we replaced Spam with ham. So it rhymed at least. And it was good. And we used the chalupa hot sauce, chipotle, which actually wasn't that spicy, and we added more. So it was good.
Great.
Well, you're right.
Great. I'm glad that a couple of you did try it. That's one of the easier recipes. Some of the recipes that are traditionally Sierra Leonean or West African can take hours to cook. And so the jollof rice is one that's kind of easy. It doesn't take quite as long as some of the other things, but I'm glad that a couple of you had a chance to give it a try. Okay, so now we're gonna have a little bit about some of the programs that the Child Reintegration Center has as part of their day-to-day activities.
I am Mabel Mustafa, the Education Manager at Child Integration Center. Education is of great importance in Sierra Leone. The education system in Sierra Leone was poorly affected following the 11 years of civil war, which tore the nation apart. The war left so many children on the streets and forced them into child labor. There is a high rate of poverty, which has made education a privilege and not a right, because only those who can afford will be able to send their children to school. Over half of the population can't read and write, and the country's primary school dropout rate is about 52%. These were the work of the CRC in education. Has become so liberating and transformational. In addition to increasing the country's literacy rates and reducing the high dropout rates, the CRC's goal for education is to equip the most vulnerable children with tools necessary to make them better, confident, and successful. CRC supports education by providing all relevant learning materials, school fees, and other charges for vulnerable children to access free quality education. CRC caters for children at all educational levels: elementary, junior, senior, and university as vocational institutions. We also provide tutorials or extra classes for children taking external examinations. For tertiary education, the CRC provides scholarships to vulnerable students who otherwise will be financially unable to attend university, vocational, or technical programs. These scholarships are highly competitive and awarded to the most dedicated students. Our donors make it possible. All the amazing services we provide to hundreds of vulnerable children, families, and communities are financially underwritten by our donors and partners. For example, it costs about 500,000 euros, which is $50 to provide school supplies and charges for a child at elementary, junior, and senior school level. As for the students in university, technical and vocational institutions, level of support per student per year goes around 4 million euros, which is around $500. This is huge. We are grateful to our donors and partners for their faithful partnership and generosity. Over 1,000 vulnerable students have benefited from the CRC educational services and supports. Those scholarships have enabled students to graduate as medical doctors, engineers, teachers, social workers, case managers, chefs, mechanics, public health experts, nurses, and many more. This has truly been a huge blessing. We thank you for your partnership with us on this journey of preparing, equipping, and empowering vulnerable children and families for a holistic tomorrow. God bless you.
So Mabel Mustafa is, I believe, the only remaining original staff person from when the CRC first opened in 2000. Mabel was one of the first staff hired, and she is still at the CRC now. She is such a lovely woman. But as you heard her talking about the education program, it's almost surprising to believe that for the lack of $50 a year, a child cannot go to school. But the average income in Sierra Leone is about $700 a year. So a family who is raising two or three children and has $700 to $800 can't afford $50 a year for each child to go to school. As Mabel was saying, the $500 post-secondary, either university or vocational training. I wish that my children's college cost $500 a year. But in Sierra Leone, that is a huge amount. That is almost an entire year's wages. And so to sacrifice that for someone to go to university is almost impossible for most families. And that's why the CRC's education program is so important. Okay, next we're going to hear from David Musa, who is the head of the training. Oh, yes, it just went out of my head, but
PCM training. Hold on.
Coaching and mentoring. Training, coaching, and mentoring department. Oh, wait, that's the wrong one. Come on. There we go.
My name is David Musa, the Senior Reintegration Consultant at the Child Reintegration Center. For every child living in an institution must have gone through separation, meaning separated from their relatives, their parents, their siblings, and even the community. So replacing a child into a family care or the community is referred to as reintegration. After reintegrating the child back into their family, the child is reunified with his or her family, and he or she becomes part of that family again, and the family becomes whole. In simple terms, family reunification means bringing a family together. We at the CRC, we care about reintegrating and reunifying children because we all know the best place for a child to grow is within the family circle and the community, where he or she is opportune to learn the family culture, values, and securely attached to their parents, their relatives, and even the extended family members, instead of living in an institution where the people they know are only aunties, uncles, who takes care of them based on job descriptions. Well, in the past, when the children were living in the CRC orphanage, a well-organized tracing was done for all children prior to reintegration. In between reintegration and the final reunification of these children, so many activities were undertaken for a successful family reunification. For instance, counseling, and also organizing attachment theory workshops for parents to whom these children will be sent to or reunified with. Children were sent for short-term holidays or weekends to meet with their family members, whilst the organization was also engaged in working with other parties like the Ministry of Social Welfare, the United Methodist Church, and helping children worldwide. But our current approach is working particularly with children on the streets, children who have left their homes because of different reasons. These children are identified by the CRC or other child protection agencies who make referral to the CRC. The families are then traced by the case managers whilst they stay in an in-care home if there is need. And after identification, the children are reintegrated back to their families. Based on the family assessments by the case managers, they can either be enrolled into the CRC program if there is need for support or just reunification and the case is closed. There are lots of activities involving reintegrating and reunifying children, and these activities involve finances and other resources, and the government alone cannot make all those necessary provisions for this process. You think of hiring staff, transportation for tracing and reunification, communication, reunification packages, academic support, and to reunify children. So the donors play a vital role in providing funds and capacity building to undertake these activities, which create a lot of impact in the lives of vulnerable children, and they at the end achieve their goal. The cost to reintegrate one child varies depending on the situation surrounding the child, the need, and maybe the location of the child. But on average, you can spend between $250 to $300.
So as you can see, that's the process for reunifying and reintegrating children who have been separated from their families. And part of that is identifying families who have been unable to care for their children for financial reasons. The most vulnerable families can also be enrolled in a program at the CRC for microfinance. And we're going to see this next video is a woman who has been through that process and is now working, received a loan and is now working as a tailor. So this one's a little harder to hear, so you have to pay attention.
This man keep forgetting him. We are not. Where?
As you can see, the cloth and the clothing that they make is very brightly colored. And you couldn't really tell there, but all of the sewing machines are treadle sewing machines because they don't have reliable electricity. So they actually have a treadle at the bottom that they have to use with their foot to make the machine go. I sew, and I don't know that I could do that. And you saw the gentleman who was ironing the pieces as the women were sewing them together. And that iron, they actually put hot coals in it because they don't have electricity. It's an old, real cast iron that they put hot coals in, and then use that to iron the fabric. Okay, we're gonna move to the village now. We're gonna see a few of the children. There's a short video of them playing. And children are children everywhere. They don't have a lot, so they make a ball out of rolled up rags, and they're actually playing like a tag game where you're trying to tag the child in the center using that ball to get them out. I remember playing games similar to that when I was little, but they will use that rolled up piece of rag that's tied into a ball to play soccer with, or all kinds of games. We're going to have a quick tour of a home.
House. Yeah, it was on also now you show them our houses.
Well, I am there. We are picking there with the leave. This, the other people there. We sit there. We got 2 rooms. I am picking there. I am with the leave. And the picking there this way, sit down. And the picking there this, I am with the leave. I am set there, service room. I am the leave. This is I
And so that is a very typical Sierra Leonean house. So it just has the 2 rooms. You have the room of where they would gather and they would sit or they would eat their meals, and then they would have a bedroom. And as you can see, there's probably about 8 to 10 people who are living in this 2-room house. And that's very, very typical. It will have a concrete or packed dirt floor like it does here, with just a wooden door and curtains between the rooms. Okay, I am going to turn it back over to you all and see if you have any questions. And I will introduce Laura, who has joined us. Laura Horvath has a very long title. She is essentially the program development person for Helping Children Worldwide, and she works very closely with both the CRC and Mercy Hospital.
Close enough.
So if you all have any questions about the programs, about what you've seen, just unmute yourself and go ahead and throw those out to us.
Laura, what's the next plan, let's say in the next 5 years for the CRC? I know that moving from the model of being an orphanage to supporting child reintegration into families was a massive, huge deal for you guys, and took a while to do that. Where do you see the programs going, or how do you hope that the programs go within the next 5 years?
That's a really great question, and I'm thrilled that you asked it, because some things have happened very recently for us that we're very excited about. David talked a little bit in the video about the tracing process that CRC uses to locate families for children, for the street-connected children that CRC now is focused on. And that has gained the interest of the government of Sierra Leone, of the Minister of Gender and Children's Affairs, who likes it so much that she's asked the CRC to train the leaders of other child welfare organizations in Sierra Leone, including UNICEF, Caritas, and World Vision, on how to do what the CRC does. And then her goal is to make that process the national standard for all child welfare organizations in Sierra Leone to use. So ultimately, the CRC will be teaching other organizations how they safely reintegrate kids back into families and ensure that they stay there, which is kind of a concern sometimes with street connected kids. And we are thrilled to have gained that national attention. On top of that, in the past 2 or 3 years, I've had the opportunity as part of my role, it's a piece we call global advocacy, which basically just puts me in rooms with other international child welfare leaders all over the world. And I just share what the CRC does, the work that they do and the excellence that they bring to their role. And organizations all over the world have invited us to participate in discussions like the UN General Day of Discussion, which is focused on children living separated from families. Some of the kids that grew up in the CRC and never were placed back into families are now speaking globally, internationally to organizations about what the impact of that has been and why it's so important for children to grow up in families. So Helping Children Worldwide and the Child Reintegration Center are names that are recognized all over the world. And that is letting us, I believe, live into our name of helping children worldwide, truly, because we're informing others in how to do this work and do this work well.
About how often or how many kids are you either unable to find a trace back to their family, or you trace back to a family that there isn't a good situation to return them to? And for those kids, what happens with them?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. Africa is really different than the US in a lot of ways in terms of how this all works. The Child Reintegration Center operates on a continuum of care. And so when a child comes into the center, the staff there begins to develop what they call the family tree. And so it's not a simple matter of just, well, who are your parents? It's, well, who are your parents and who are your aunts and uncles and who are your grandparents and who are your cousins and where, if you have an older sibling, where do they live? So they run down every person that child is connected to the very end. So that if, for example, that first placement, if we decide, okay, well, we're going to place you back with your mother, if that first placement is not safe or seems abusive or seems like it's just not a good fit for that child, then we move to the second placement, and then the third placement, and then the fourth placement. And Africa is a very interconnected society. Families live, like Linda was showing you, the family group, there are 8 or 10 people that live in that household. They're probably all related. They may or may not be actually, but usually they're very, very connected. We've had kids who have been taken in by one I love to talk about is a woman who took a child in, not because she was related to the child at all, but because she grew up in the village of that child's mother, and she felt a responsibility for that child because of the connectedness of having grown up in those villages together. So the first thing you do is you look for the biological family, the biological parent. If that's not a good placement, then you go to what we call kinship care. And that's your grandparents, your aunt or uncle, a cousin, somebody that is biologically connected, but might be in the extended family. If that doesn't work, then the CRC looks for what they call foster families. And these usually, they operate in Sierra Leone more like a domestic adoption. The way that we would consider a domestic adoption. And so there are a handful of kids that are in these foster placements that are permanent family placements with people who they're just not biologically related to. Next after that would be an international adoption. And I can tell you in more than 8 years of reintegration work, we've never once gotten to a place where we haven't been able to find a Sierra Leonean family, related or not, to take that child in. We've never gotten to a place where we've said, okay, well, we have no other recourse but to get them adopted into the US or into, some other country. And the very last resort is institutional care, and then only temporarily. So we're always working toward placing a child in a family, in a loving and permanent family. That's the goal, and that they will pursue that. The CRC staff pursues that and pursues it and pursues it until they feel comfortable that that placement is a safe and loving and good place for that child.
Thank you. That was very interesting. Also, when we sponsor a child now through the Integration Center, what is our funds going to? What's happening? Do you know my question?
Yeah, no, yes, I do. And it's a really good question, because I think for a long time, sponsors probably have had the perception that the funds that they're donating are paying for material things, for education, tuition, books, and uniforms, and healthcare at Mercy Hospital, and all of that is true. But the part that I think we've not communicated real well is this kind of what I think is the critically important part of what the CRC does, and that is the case management and the social work. You know, it's reintegrating a child is not a simple matter of just figuring out a good placement for that child, because you have to remember, these kids have been separated from care, which is a trauma for them. It's a psychological, emotional trauma for them. And some of them have been separated from care for a very long time, living on the street, and all of the attendant trauma that goes along with a life on the street. And so all of that has to be healed. And if you place a traumatized child back into a family and they're not equipped to deal with that trauma, traumatized kids don't act like kids that are not traumatized. There are behavioral differences, there are emotional needs and psychological needs that need to be met. And so a lot of the work that the CRC staff does is help families to form healthy attachments with these kids, to heal that trauma and bond them together. And then family. So, you know, when we had kids in the orphanage, we had staff very focused on the needs of individual children. CRC staff now are focused on the needs of an entire family unit, because they know that if a child is going to thrive and be happy and grow up to be a whole human, they have to provide support and build capacity of that entire family. So they have parenting workshops, they have attachment workshops, they teach financial literacy, anything that they can do to help those parents build their own capacity to care for their own children well. And that work is very, very important. It's a little less tangible than some of the other things that we do, but it's the most important work, I think, that they do.
Thank you. And last question for me. How long do you, after you reintegrate a child, how long do you follow up with them to make sure it's working out?
Yeah, that's a good question too. We get that question often. So it's a social work question, and it's case by case. Some families will come into the Child Reintegration Center and the bond will be formed pretty quickly, and they will move off of case management. Or move off of the need to have so many site visits and things like that. So there's a case management kind of process. Everybody comes in at the red zone, where we have concerns about abuse and risk and all of that, because we have to make sure that if we're going to place a kid back in a family, that's a safe situation. In that zone, there's a lot of intensive social work. Social workers are there almost on a daily basis. They're making phone calls, they're doing drop-in visits, they're trying to assess whether this is a good and safe environment. Once they move through that process and they know this is the permanent placement that they want to work on, the social worker will sit down with the family and with the caregiver, and they'll talk about what does graduation look like? What does success look like for your family? And they'll develop a case plan. How do we get from where we are right now, where you've got some needs, you need some supports, you're trying to do some social work to help the family bond together, but how do we move from that to where you're saying to me, you know what, we're fine, we're getting along great, and we don't need you to come and check in on us all the time, because that is the goal. And so it just depends on the family. And the other thing about social work and case management is that, you know, life is complicated and things happen that you can't foresee, like a pandemic or a job loss or an illness. So it's possible that a family will move along the trajectory toward graduation, and then something terrible happens, some crisis hits. And then we just move a family back to more supportive social work care, and we just start all over and continue to move them toward that process, toward that graduation goal. So it's not a simple answer, how long it should take. We're thinking we'd like for it to take somewhere in the 3 to 5 year range, but we're never going to get to a place where we're not doing that on a case-by-case basis. And we're never going to release a family from care until they're absolutely ready.
Hi, Laura, what does the program's caseload look like right now? Because trauma-informed care is highly, highly intensive. And I do work with local and basic or hyperlocal work within the Sterling area of basic needs. And so I've had my own trauma-informed training. And the first time that you walk through that, you're like, because there's so much that's with that. What is the caseload that your social workers are carrying right now? And what's the ratio? How many families are they working with?
Yeah, so the caseload, I think, and it's been a while since I've looked at it. It was, when we first started, it was horrible. It was horrifying. I think it was like 70 to 80 cases per caseworker. And that was really daunting. I think it's now closer to the kind of 40 to 50 per case manager range, which is still really high by US standards, but it's actually very good in the international world. And what we're working on now is helping the case managers to sort of identify what zones families are in so that they're able to focus most of their time and energy and attention on the red and orange zone families that need more intensive support, and less of that on the what we call the yellow 2 zone, which is where you probably don't need case management. You just need to have access to parenting curriculum or family strengthening curriculum and check-ins periodically to just make sure everything's tracking the way that it should be. So they're working that out and developing those processes, and I think that will help us steward those resources even more efficiently.
Hi, Laura. I have a follow-up question to that, actually. What kind of staff resources do you have? What's the size of your staff on site in Bow, and then how are they supported, and by how many folks outside of Bow?
Okay. So the case management team, there's a larger CRC staff, but the case management team is 12. There are 12 case managers. About half of them have social work degrees and the other half do not. And this is also really common in the developing world in this particular field. We consider those folks paraprofessionals, and they've received tons of training, and they had excellent people skills. Some of them were residential staff that already had connections to the kids, and so we built on those relationships. And that was beneficial in the transition, certainly. Since then, they've received tons of training. They get training from licensed clinical social workers here in the US from time to time. They're currently working with a social work team out of the UK with an organization called Strengthening Families and Children. And the man that's working with them, his name is Dan Hope. He's completely brilliant. He is working directly with the team on the ground to develop protocols and forms and processes that are specific to the CRC and its needs and its population. So that's been really rich and rewarding. They've gone through training with Christian Alliance for Orphans. They've gone through, I can't think of her name. She's like the grandmother of trauma-informed care of the TBRI program. Anyway, they did that training online last year. They're really eager students. And so, everything that kind of comes along, they're sort of hungrily eager to learn more and to get better and improve their skills.
Currently, what's the number of the children are in this program now?
I think we're just north of like 560 kids in the program. It's a little bit, it's somewhere around 450 families represented in that number. And I like to give the family member, because now that we're having a more holistic family, focus instead of focus on an individual child, I think that it's important to communicate that.
Any other questions about the CRC and the programs that it runs? Okay, well, I really want to thank you all for attending tonight. I hope that we were able to answer all your questions and you got a good overview of what the Child Reintegration Center does. Next week, we are going to visit Mercy Hospital and see how Mercy Hospital's programs are impacting families and children in the Bow area. So thank you for your time tonight. Rebecca, I will send you the recording tomorrow and you'll be able to get that online. And I'm not going to give you any homework this week.
As long as it doesn't include spice, my boys will be okay with that. So, Laura, my poor little fair-skinned boys could not stomach the jollof rice. So we tried, we really did. I like it, but they can't do it. So it's
They like it spicy there.
I know. That's what I told them. So thank you everyone for coming. We'll send out the recording if you missed anything tonight.
All right. Thank you so much for letting me pop in.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.